In the marble-floored foyer of Chicago's most exclusive estate, a 72-year-old woman was about to make a decision that would shatter 3 generations of family expectations. What started as a deliberate exclusion from a single photograph would end with the rewriting of a $50 million will. Margaret Thompson wasn't just any grandmother. She was the matriarch who'd built an empire from nothing. And today she discovered exactly how much her own flesh and blood truly valued her presence in their lives. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Margaret Thompson's fingers traced the edge of the silver-framed photograph that had arrived in yesterday's mail. Her reading glasses perched on her nose as the afternoon light streamed through the towering windows of her Lincoln Park mansion. The image was professionally shot, clearly expensive, capturing 4 generations of the Thompson family gathered on the sprawling lawn of her eldest son's Winnetka estate. Everyone was there. Everyone except her. At 72, Margaret had built Thompson Industries from a single construction company into a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate that dominated Chicago's commercial real estate landscape. Her weathered hands, still steady despite her age, had signed contracts that shaped the city's skyline. Those same hands now trembled slightly as she counted the faces in the photograph. 37 family members spanning from her great-grandchildren to her own siblings, all arranged in perfect rows like a corporate board meeting disguised as a family reunion. Her eldest son, Robert Thompson Jr., stood prominently in the center, his wife Patricia beside him, their 3 adult children and spouses forming the next row. Her second son, Michael, had flown in from California with his family. She could see his twin boys, now in their 20s, sporting the kind of casual confidence that came from never worrying about money. Even her daughter Sarah was there from New York, looking polished and distant as always, her investment banker husband and their teenage daughter completing their perfect nuclear unit. But it wasn't just her immediate children. The photograph included cousins, nephews, nieces, even family members she'd helped put through college, whose business ventures she'd funded, whose mortgages she'd quietly paid when times got tough. People who owed their current prosperity to decisions she'd made in boardrooms and at kitchen tables over the past 5 decades. Margaret set the photograph down on her mahogany desk and reached for her phone, scrolling through the family group chat that her granddaughter Emma had created months ago. The messages told the story she'd somehow missed. Planning conversations that had gone on for weeks, discussions about catering, photographers, the perfect weekend when everyone could finally get together. Everyone, apparently, except the woman who'd made it all possible. The mansion around her felt larger than usual, its 12 rooms echoing with the kind of silence that only comes from being deliberately excluded. Margaret had purchased this house 40 years ago when Thompson Industries first hit the Fortune 500 list. She'd chosen it not for its grandeur, but for its potential to host gatherings. The dining room that could seat 24, the living spaces designed for conversation, the guest bedrooms that had sheltered family members through divorces, job losses, and life transitions. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. Margaret Thompson had never been a woman who dwelt on self-pity. Growing up during the Great Depression had taught her that survival required action, not emotion. When her husband died suddenly at 52, leaving her with 3 young children and a struggling construction business, she hadn't mourned. She'd rolled up her sleeves and learned how to read blueprints, negotiate with unions, and navigate the boys' club of 1970s Chicago construction. But this felt different. This wasn't circumstance or tragedy or even conflict. This was choice. Her family had actively decided that their group portrait, their official documentation of who belonged to the Thompson legacy, would be more aesthetically pleasing without her in it. Margaret returned to her desk and opened her laptop, navigating to the private Instagram account her youngest granddaughter had tagged her in months ago. The images from the weekend filled her screen. Candid shots of the reunion she'd never been invited to, hashtag celebrating, hashtag Thompson family tradition, and hashtag 4 generations strong. The irony wasn't lost on her that the tradition they were celebrating existed only because of the woman they'd decided to edit out of the picture. She scrolled through comments from family members she'd bankrolled through MBA programs, whose children attended private schools on Thompson Industries scholarships, whose homes bore mortgages she'd personally guaranteed. Hearts and fire emojis celebrated a gathering that had required extensive coordination that had deliberately excluded the family's founding member. Her phone rang, startling her from her digital archaeology. The caller ID showed her assistant's name, Jennifer Chen, who'd worked with Margaret for 15 years and had become something closer to a daughter than most of her actual family. "Mrs. Thompson, I wanted to confirm tomorrow's board meeting agenda, but I thought I should mention something first." Jennifer's voice carried a carefulness that Margaret recognized. "I received an interesting call from your son Robert's assistant about updating some estate planning documents." She mentioned something about a family photograph for the annual report cover. Margaret felt a cold realization settle in her stomach. "What kind of estate planning documents?" She was asking about the timeline for your succession planning announcement. "Apparently there's some expectation that it'll coincide with the annual shareholder meeting next month." Jennifer paused. "Mrs. Thompson, I don't have any succession planning announcement on our calendar." The pieces began falling into place with the clarity of a well-constructed business plan. The family reunion hadn't been about celebrating their relationships. It had been about positioning themselves for what they assumed was her imminent retirement. The photograph wasn't just documentation. It was marketing material for the Thompson dynasty's next chapter, one that apparently didn't require her presence to legitimize their claims to leadership. Margaret had built Thompson Industries on the principle that respect was earned through results, not inherited through genetics. She'd promoted based on competence, not family connections. Only one of her children, Michael, had ever shown genuine interest in the business itself rather than just its profits. Robert had pursued law, joining the company's board but never its operations. Sarah had built her own career in New York finance, accepting family dividends but maintaining careful distance from the company's day-to-day realities. Yet somehow they'd collectively decided that her legacy was theirs to inherit, her life's work theirs to distribute, her empire theirs to rule, all without consulting the woman who'd built it, brick by brick, contract by contract, decision by decision. Margaret opened her desk drawer and pulled out a leather-bound folder containing documents she'd been avoiding for months. Her lawyers had been pressuring her to finalize her estate planning, to create the succession roadmap that would ensure Thompson Industries' smooth transition after her death. She'd been procrastinating, partly because talking about death felt premature for a woman who still worked 60-hour weeks, and partly because she'd been struggling with how to divide her legacy fairly among children who'd contributed so differently to its creation. The photograph on her desk seemed to have answered that question for her. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. "Harrison? It's Margaret Thompson. I need to schedule a meeting with you and the estate planning team. Tomorrow, if possible." She paused, looking again at the family portrait that had excluded her. "I've decided it's time to finalize my will, and I think you'll find my decisions quite interesting." Margaret Thompson had built her fortune by recognizing opportunities that others missed, by making bold decisions when conventional wisdom suggested caution. Looking at the photograph of her family's gathering, their celebration of a legacy they assumed they'd inherit simply by existing, she saw the clearest opportunity of her career. If her family could make decisions about who belonged in their future without consulting her, she could make decisions about who belonged in her will without consulting them. The Thompson fortune had been built by a woman they'd found easy to exclude from their planning. Perhaps it was time they learned exactly how difficult it would be to exclude her from their future. The evening light was fading over Lake Michigan, casting long shadows across Margaret's study. She had work to do, phone calls to make, and a legacy to reconsider. For the first time in months, she felt the familiar surge of energy that had carried her through decades of building an empire. Tomorrow, she would begin the most important business deal of her life, determining who truly deserved to inherit what she'd spent a lifetime creating. The family photograph sat on her desk like evidence in a case she was building. They'd wanted to picture their future without her. Soon, they'd discover what their future would actually look like when she was no longer there to provide it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Margaret Thompson arrived at her downtown office at 6:30 a.m., 2 hours before her usual time. The 42nd floor of the Willis Tower housed Thompson Industries executive suites, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of the city she'd helped build. Today, those windows reflected a woman on a mission. Jennifer Chen found her there at 8 a.m., surrounded by stacks of financial documents and legal files that hadn't seen daylight in years. "Mrs. Thompson, you're here early. And you've—" Jennifer paused, taking in the organized chaos around Margaret's desk. "Been busy. Jennifer, I need you to pull every financial record we have on family members for the past 10 years. Every loan, every investment, every scholarship, every bailout." Margaret's voice carried the crisp authority that had made her legendary in Chicago business circles. "I want to see exactly how much Thompson money has flowed to Thompson family members." Jennifer's eyebrows rose slightly, but she'd worked for Margaret long enough to know that questions would be answered in due time. "Everything? That's going to be quite extensive." "Everything? And Jennifer, I want you to personally verify each transaction. Don't delegate this one." As Jennifer set to work, Margaret began her own investigation. She opened the company's HR database and started cross-referencing family employment records. What she found was more extensive than she'd remembered. Robert's eldest son, David, held a vice president title in the legal department, despite having been there only 3 years and showing little initiative. Sarah's daughter, Alexandra, had a summer internship that paid more than most full-time positions. Michael's twins both had consulting contracts that seemed remarkably generous for the minimal work they provided. Her phone buzzed with a text from her granddaughter, Emma. "Grandma M, did you see our family reunion pics? We missed you. Hope you're doing well. Red heart." Margaret stared at the message, noting its careful phrasing. "We missed you." Past tense, as if her absence had been inevitable rather than orchestrated. She scrolled through Emma's social media again, this time looking for clues she'd missed yesterday. The planning posts went back months. Tagged locations showed coordination between multiple states, and the photographer credits revealed they'd hired the same firm that shot corporate executives for Fortune magazine covers. This hadn't been a spontaneous family gathering. This had been a carefully orchestrated corporate event disguised as a reunion. Margaret's intercom buzzed. "Mrs. Thompson, Harrison Blackwell is here for your 9 a.m. Harrison Blackwell entered with the measured confidence of a man who'd been handling Chicago's most complex estate planning for 30 years. His silver hair and expensive suit spoke of discretion and competence, qualities Margaret had relied on when building her own legal strategy over the decades. "Margaret, I have to say I'm intrigued by your call yesterday. You've been putting off this conversation for 2 years. Harrison settled into the leather chair across from her desk, pulling out a legal pad and fountain pen. "What's changed?" Margaret slid the family photograph across her desk without comment. Harrison studied it for a long moment, his practiced eye immediately understanding what Margaret was showing him. "They held a family gathering without you. Not just any gathering. Look at the staging, the photographer, the formal arrangement. This isn't a casual reunion, Harrison. This is a succession announcement waiting to happen." Margaret leaned forward. "And yesterday, my son Robert's assistant called Jennifer, asking about succession planning timelines for next month's shareholder meeting." Harrison's expression shifted from curiosity to professional concern. "They're planning to present this as evidence of family unity for the board?" "Exactly. The problem is, Harrison, I've never discussed succession with any of them. They're operating under assumptions I've never confirmed, planning a future I've never approved, and apparently documenting their legitimacy without my participation." Margaret pulled out a thick folder Jennifer had compiled that morning. "I've been investigating our family's financial relationships. The numbers are illuminating." She opened the folder, revealing spreadsheets that told a story of unprecedented generosity. "In the past decade alone, Thompson Industries and my personal accounts have provided over $12 million in direct support to family members. Robert's law practice? We were his first major client, and we've steered millions in business his way. Sarah's investment fund? I was their anchor investor with a $20 million commitment. Michael's tech startup? Thompson Industries provided both funding and our entire digital infrastructure contract. Harrison was taking notes rapidly. And the grandchildren? Full college tuition for all of them. Graduate school for those who wanted it. Down payments on homes. David's wedding alone cost us $200,000 when his in-laws couldn't contribute. Margaret pulled out bank statements showing regular transfers. Then there are the monthly stipends. Most of them receive what amounts to a full-time salary just for being Thompson family members. Margaret, this level of support is… Harrison paused, calculating quickly. This is wealth redistribution on the scale of a small foundation. Exactly. And not one of them has ever expressed gratitude or acknowledged that their current lifestyles depend entirely on Thompson Industries' success. They've come to view this money as an entitlement rather than a gift. Margaret pulled out her phone and showed Harrison the family group chat. Look at how they discussed the reunion planning. Everyone's travel is being reimbursed by the family fund, which is my money. The photographer was paid through the Thompson Industries entertainment budget. They're literally using my resources to document my exclusion. Harrison was quiet for a moment, absorbing the implications. What are you thinking in terms of your estate planning? Margaret had spent the morning considering exactly that question. I want to understand my options, Harrison. Complete options. What would happen if I disinherited them entirely? What about partial disinheritance? Can I create conditional inheritances based on specific behaviors or achievements? All possible, though each approach has different implications. Complete disinheritance would likely trigger legal challenges. Conditional inheritances can be very effective but require careful structuring. Harrison set down his pen. Margaret, before we go down this path, I have to ask, is this about hurt feelings, or do you believe your family is genuinely undeserving of inheriting your wealth? Margaret considered the question, looking out at the Chicago skyline where Thompson Industries cranes dotted construction sites across the city. Harrison, I've built this company on merit. Every promotion, every contract, every decision has been based on competence and contribution. My family has received benefits for 50 years, based solely on their DNA, not their merit. They've planned my professional succession without my input and excluded me from their family documentation. If they can make decisions about my legacy without consulting me, I can make decisions about their inheritance without consulting them. Jennifer knocked and entered with a fresh stack of documents. Mrs. Thompson, you asked me to look into the timeline of their reunion planning? She placed a printed email chain on the desk. These emails go back 6 months. The conversation started when Robert received what he calls insider information about your retirement plans from someone at Whitman & Associates. Margaret felt her jaw tighten. Whitman & Associates was the consulting firm that had been pressuring her to create a succession plan. They've been discussing my retirement with my consultants? More than that, Jennifer continued. According to these emails, they've been told that you're legally required to announce succession plans within the next quarter due to SEC regulations about family-owned public companies. Harrison looked up sharply. That's not accurate. There's no such requirement for private companies, and Thompson Industries isn't publicly traded. So they've been operating on false information to justify planning my retirement? Margaret felt the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. They're not just excluding me from family events, Harrison. They're actively working to exclude me from my own company based on legal advice they have no authority to seek. Margaret stood and walked to her window, looking down at the construction sites that employed thousands of people, the buildings that generated billions in revenue, the empire she'd built through 6 decades of relentless work. Her family wasn't just taking her money for granted, they were taking her leadership for granted, assuming her irrelevance while simultaneously planning to inherit her relevance. Harrison, I want to see 3 complete estate planning scenarios by Friday. First, traditional inheritance divided among my children. Second, conditional inheritance based on demonstrated contribution to Thompson Industries. Third, complete disinheritance with assets directed toward employees and charitable foundations. She turned back to face him. And I want to understand the tax implications of each option. If I'm going to make a decision about my legacy, I want to make it with complete information. Harrison was scribbling notes rapidly. This is going to require extensive documentation and planning. Are you sure you want to move this quickly? Margaret smiled, feeling more energized than she had in months. Harrison, I've been making quick decisions for 70 years. The only difference is that this time, the decision affects people who've been making quick decisions about me without my permission. As Harrison left with his assignment, Margaret returned to her investigation. She had 3 days to understand exactly how much her family's lifestyle depended on her generosity, and exactly what their future would look like if that generosity ended. The family photograph still sat on her desk, 37 faces celebrating a legacy they'd assumed was theirs to inherit. Margaret Thompson had built her fortune by seeing opportunities others missed. Today, she was seeing the clearest opportunity of her career, the chance to teach her family the difference between entitlement and inheritance, between assumption and achievement. They'd excluded her from their planning. Soon they'd understand exactly what exclusion felt like when the stakes involved $50 million and the empire she'd spent a lifetime building. Margaret Thompson sat in her Bentley outside Robert's Winnetka mansion, the same sprawling estate where the family photograph had been taken just days ago. The circular driveway could accommodate a dozen cars, and today it held the familiar collection of luxury vehicles that signaled another Thompson family gathering was in progress. This time, however, Margaret hadn't been excluded. She'd invited herself. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from Robert since she'd sent her text an hour ago. Family meeting at your house. 7 p.m., non-negotiable, mother. She'd turned off her phone after sending similar messages to Michael and Sarah, each one carrying the weight of 7 decades of maternal authority that none of them had ever successfully challenged. Jennifer sat in the passenger seat, laptop balanced on her knees, fingers flying across the keyboard as she made final adjustments to the presentation Margaret had demanded that afternoon. Mrs. Thompson, are you certain you want to do this tonight? We could schedule something more formal, maybe at the office. Jennifer, they've been making informal decisions about my life for months. It's time for them to face the informal consequences. Margaret checked her watch, 7:03 p.m. Late enough to make her point, early enough to maintain control of the evening's agenda. The front door opened before Margaret could ring the bell. Robert stood there in his casual Friday attire, khakis and a polo shirt that probably cost more than most people earned in a week. At 55, he'd inherited Margaret's strong jawline but none of her steel. Behind him, she could see Patricia arranging cheese and crackers on serving platters, the kind of nervous hosting that suggested they'd been discussing strategy since receiving her text. Mother, thank God you're here. When you sent that message, we thought something was wrong. Robert's relief seemed genuine, which only strengthened Margaret's resolve. He genuinely believed she was here for reconciliation rather than reckoning. Something is wrong, Robert. That's exactly why I'm here. Margaret entered without waiting for an invitation, Jennifer following with her equipment bag. Where is everyone? Living room. Mother, before we go in there, I want you to know that we've all been talking, and we realize we should have handled the reunion differently. We never meant to. Save it for the group, Robert. I prefer efficient meetings. The living room fell silent as Margaret entered. Michael had flown in from San Francisco. His presence confirmed this was more than a casual gathering. Sarah sat stiffly on the Italian leather sofa, her investment banker posture suggesting she'd already calculated that this conversation would be unpleasant. The adult grandchildren were conspicuously absent, which meant this was a senior leadership meeting rather than a family social call. Margaret took the wingback chair that commanded the best view of the room, while Jennifer set up her laptop and portable projector. Jennifer will be taking notes and managing our visual aids tonight. I trust no one objects to documentation? Patricia's cheese arrangement clattered slightly as she set it down. Margaret, dear, this feels very formal. Are you sure we need? Patricia. You've been part of this family for 30 years, and you've benefited from Thompson generosity that entire time. Yes, you need to hear this. Margaret's voice carried the boardroom authority that had made grown men reconsider million-dollar decisions. Jennifer, please begin with slide 1. The wall illuminated with a financial summary that made Sarah straighten involuntarily. Thompson Industries Family Support. 2014 minus 2024 inches topped a spreadsheet showing monthly transfers, loan forgiveness, and direct payments totaling $12.3 million. This is what Thompson family membership has cost my company and personal accounts over the past decade, Margaret began, her tone clinical. Robert, your share comes to $3.2 million. Michael, yours is $2.8 million. Sarah, despite living in New York and maintaining distance from the family business, you've received $4.1 million in various forms. Michael leaned forward, his tech entrepreneur instincts recognizing a pitch when he heard one. Mother, if this is about gratitude, we've always been. Michael, you'll have your turn to speak. Right now, you'll listen. Margaret nodded to Jennifer. Next slide. The screen showed a timeline of the reunion planning, starting 6 months ago, with Robert's initial email to a family group chat that had excluded Margaret. This is how you planned your family gathering. 6 months of coordination, vendor negotiations, and scheduling that somehow never included consulting the family's founding member. Robert's face was reddening. Mother, that was just logistics. We knew you were busy with work, and we thought you could make decisions about Thompson family representation without Thompson family leadership. Next slide, Jennifer. The projection showed the professional photographer's invoice, paid through Thompson Industries' corporate entertainment budget. You used company funds to hire professional photography for your gathering. Photography that was intended, according to these email chains Jennifer recovered, to be used in, quote, succession announcement materials for next month's board meeting. Sarah finally spoke, her voice carrying the careful control of someone accustomed to difficult financial conversations. Mother, I think there's been a misunderstanding about the succession planning. We weren't trying to pressure you into anything. We were just preparing for eventual. Eventual what, Sarah? My death? My retirement? My displacement? Margaret stood, her 72 years not diminishing her commanding presence. You've been planning my professional funeral based on legal advice you sought behind my back, using my money to document my irrelevance. Patricia attempted intervention with the desperate diplomacy of someone who'd married into wealth rather than earned it. Margaret, surely we can work this out. Families should be able to discuss these things openly. Excellent point, Patricia. Let's discuss things openly. Margaret nodded to Jennifer again. Show them the Whitman and Associates correspondence. The screen filled with email exchanges between Robert and the consulting firm that had been pressuring Margaret about succession planning. The emails revealed that Robert had been feeding them information about Thompson Industries' internal operations and Margaret's health status, seeking legal ammunition to force retirement decisions. Robert, you've been sharing confidential company information with outside consultants to build a case for my mandatory retirement. Is this the open family discussion Patricia was referring to? Robert was now standing, his lawyer instincts finally recognizing that this was litigation rather than conversation. Mother, everything I shared was public information or general observations. I never violated any. You told them I've been showing signs of cognitive decline. You suggested that my decision-making has become erratic. You provided them with details about my work schedule and personal habits. Margaret's voice remained calm, but her words landed like legal summons. You've been building a competency challenge case against me, Robert. The room fell silent except for the soft clicking of Jennifer's keyboard as she documented reactions and comments. Michael finally found his voice. Mother, if we made mistakes in how we handled this, we can fix them. The family gathering wasn't meant to exclude you. The succession planning wasn't meant to pressure you. We just want to make sure the family business is protected. The family business? Margaret's laugh carried no warmth. Michael, you work in Silicon Valley. Sarah works on Wall Street. Robert practices law. None of you work in the family business. You benefit from the family business, but you don't contribute to the family business. She walked to the window overlooking the perfectly manicured lawn where they'd posed for their professional photograph. You want to protect Thompson Industries? From what? From the woman who built it? From the leadership that's generated record profits for 6 consecutive years? From the management that's expanded into 4 new markets and created 3,000 jobs? Sarah's investment training finally kicked in. Mother, we understand that you've built something incredible. We're not questioning your competence or your achievements. We're just concerned about long-term planning and you decided that long-term planning could be accomplished without short-term communication with me. Margaret turned back to face them. You planned my succession without my input. You documented my family without my presence. You sought legal advice about my competency without my knowledge. Patricia made one final attempt at peacemaking. Margaret, what can we do to fix this? How can we make this right? Margaret smiled for the first time that evening, but it wasn't a smile that offered comfort. Patricia, you can't fix this, you can only learn from it. She nodded to Jennifer. Final slide. The projection showed 3 columns. Current will status, Option A, traditional inheritance, and Option B, merit-based inheritance, and Option C, complete reallocation. Tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with Harrison Blackwell to finalize my estate planning. These are the 3 options I'm considering. Margaret let them study the columns, watching as the implications became clear. Option A divides my assets among you based on traditional family inheritance principles. Option B conditions your inheritance on demonstrated contribution to Thompson Industries over the next 5 years. Option C redirects all assets to employee profit-sharing programs and charitable foundations. The silence stretched long enough for everyone to read and understand what they were seeing. Mother, Robert's voice had lost all its casual confidence. You can't be serious about Option C. Robert, I'm serious about all 3 options. The question is which one you'll earn. Margaret closed Jennifer's laptop with a definitive snap. You have 30 days to demonstrate that you understand the difference between entitlement and inheritance, between family membership and family contribution. As she moved toward the door, Sarah called out desperately, "What do you want from us?" Margaret paused, considering the question that should have been asked months ago. "I want you to prove that you value my presence in your lives more than you value my presence to your lives. I want you to demonstrate that Thompson family membership means participation, not just profit sharing." She opened the front door, then turned back for one final observation. "You excluded me from your family photograph because you thought I was no longer necessary for your family's future. You have 30 days to convince me that you're necessary for mine." The Bentley pulled away from the mansion, leaving behind a family that had just discovered the difference between assuming inheritance and earning it. Margaret Thompson had spent 6 decades making tough business decisions. Tonight, she'd made the toughest personal decision of her life, and for the first time in months, she felt completely in control of her own legacy. The emergency family meeting had been called for 10 a.m. at Robert's law office, but by 9:45, the conference room was already crackling with tension. Margaret hadn't been invited to this gathering, a fact that would have bothered her a week ago, but today merely confirmed that her message from the previous evening had been received with the gravity she'd intended. Jennifer Chen sat in her car across the street from the downtown Chicago law firm, laptop open, monitoring the digital fallout from last night's confrontation. Her phone buzzed constantly with updates she was tracking for Margaret: credit card transactions showing frantic activity, airline bookings suggesting panic travel, and most tellingly, a sudden spike in Google searches from various Thompson family members on topics like contesting a will and elder abuse laws. "Mrs. Thompson," Jennifer spoke into her Bluetooth headset, "the activity suggests they're taking this very seriously. Sarah booked a red-eye from New York last night. Michael's assistant just purchased a ticket for tomorrow morning from San Francisco. And Robert's been making calls since 6 a.m. His assistant's calendar shows meetings with 3 different estate planning attorneys today." Margaret's voice came through clearly from her office 40 floors above. "Good. When people finally understand the stakes, they tend to take action. What about the financial side?" "That's where it gets interesting," Jennifer continued, scrolling through alerts on her screen. "David Thompson, Robert's son, just called our accounting department asking about the status of his consultant payments. Alexandra, Sarah's daughter, sent an email asking about her summer internship extension. And the twins both submitted expense reports for quote, family business travel related to last night's meeting." Margaret's dry laugh carried through the phone. "Even in crisis, they're thinking about cash flow. What else?" "Patricia's been calling family members all morning. Based on social media activity, she's organizing what looks like an intervention. The language they're using suggests they think you're having some kind of breakdown." Jennifer paused, watching as another luxury car pulled up to Robert's building. "They're framing this as a mental health crisis rather than a business decision." This revelation didn't surprise Margaret. Throughout her career, she'd watched men dismiss women's strategic decisions as emotional outbursts. Competitors frame her business moves as irrational risk-taking. The fact that her own family was following the same playbook only reinforced her conviction that last night's ultimatum had been necessary. Jennifer, I want you to document everything they do over the next week. Every meeting, every financial inquiry, every attempt to undermine my competency. If they want to play hardball, they'll discover I invented the game. 2 hours later, Margaret was reviewing quarterly reports when her assistant announced an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Thompson, your granddaughter Emma is here. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent. Emma Thompson was 26, fresh from Northwestern's MBA program, and possessed the kind of earnest confidence that came from growing up with financial security. She entered Margaret's office with the careful energy of someone who'd been elected as the family's diplomatic representative. Grandma Margaret, we need to talk. Emma's voice carried the studied calm of someone who'd been coached on crisis management. The family is really worried about you. Margaret gestured to the chair across from her desk, the same seat where Harrison Blackwell had sat when they'd planned her estate options. Worried about what, exactly? About yesterday. About the things you said. About these ultimatums you're making. Emma pulled out her phone, showing a group text thread. Everyone's saying you seemed angry and confused. Patricia thinks you might be having some kind of cognitive episode. And what do you think, Emma? Emma hesitated, clearly struggling between family loyalty and personal observation. I think you seemed more focused and strategic than I've seen you in months. But Grandma, $50 million? You're talking about disinheriting your own children over a photograph? Margaret leaned back in her chair, studying her granddaughter with the same analytical approach she used when evaluating business partners. Emma, let me ask you something. In the past 5 years, how much money have you received from Thompson Industries or from my personal accounts? I don't understand what that has to do with. Answer the question. Emma's MBA training kicked in, her mind automatically calculating figures. College tuition was about $200,000. Graduate school was another $150,000. My apartment down payment was $50,000. The car was $40,000. Monthly stipend is $3,000. She paused, realizing what she was revealing. Maybe $500,000 total? And in exchange for that $500,000, what have you contributed to Thompson Industries? I've been in school, Grandma. I just graduated. You're looking for a job in marketing at a tech startup in Austin. A job that has nothing to do with the family business that funded your education and lifestyle. Margaret pulled out Emma's resume, which Jennifer had printed that morning. You're not planning to work for Thompson Industries. You're not planning to contribute to the company that made your opportunities possible. You're planning to take the education I bought you and use it to build someone else's empire. Emma's composure cracked slightly. That's not fair. I never promised to work for the family business. You never said the money was conditional on. Exactly. Margaret's voice carried the satisfaction of making a crucial point. None of you ever promised anything in exchange for Thompson generosity. None of you ever acknowledged that this money came with expectations. You've all treated it as an entitlement rather than an investment. Margaret stood and walked to her window, looking down at the construction sites where Thompson Industries projects employed thousands of people. Emma, do you know what I was doing when I was 26? Running the company after Grandpa died. Wrong. I was learning to run the company. I was working 16-hour days, making mistakes, getting educated by failure and necessity. I was earning the right to make decisions about other people's livelihoods. She turned back to face Emma. You're 26 with an MBA, $500,000 in benefits, and no idea what you want to contribute to the world. The difference between us isn't age, Emma, it's accountability. Emma's phone buzzed with what was clearly a prompted text. She glanced at it, then looked up with renewed determination. Grandma, the family wants to make things right. We're planning a proper reunion, one that includes you from the beginning. We want to sit down and discuss succession planning together, as a family. When? This weekend. Everyone's flying in. We'll do it at your house since that's where you're most comfortable. We'll handle all the planning and you'll document it with professional photography to show what cooperative family members you are? Margaret's smile carried no warmth. Emma, you're trying to solve a business problem with social solutions. This isn't about hurt feelings or family gatherings. This is about 50 years of taking without giving, assuming without earning, and planning without permission. Emma's carefully rehearsed composure finally collapsed. So what do you want from us? What can we possibly do in 30 days to prove we deserve to inherit what our grandfather built? Your grandfather built a small construction company, Emma. I built Thompson Industries. And what I want is simple. I want you to demonstrate that you understand the difference between inheritance and entitlement. Margaret returned to her desk, pulling out a file folder. Here are 3 immediate options for family members who want to prove their commitment to Thompson legacy. She spread 3 documents across her desk. Option 1. Join Thompson Industries in an entry-level position with standard compensation and benefits. No family privileges, no fast-track promotions, no special treatment. Prove your value through performance. Emma examined the job descriptions, her expression shifting as she realized these were real positions with real responsibilities. Option 2. Start your own business venture with a loan from Thompson Industries. Standard interest rates, standard repayment terms, standard accountability. Show me you can build something rather than just inherit something. And option 3? Option 3. Pay back the money you've received over the past 5 years and earn your inheritance through independent achievement. Show me that Thompson family membership means something more than financial dependency. Emma stared at the documents, the weight of actual expectations replacing the comfort of assumed entitlement. Grandma, this changes everything. Everything needed to change, Emma. The question is whether you're ready to be part of the solution or whether you'll join the rest of the family in treating me like an obstacle to your financial security. As Emma left with copies of the 3 options, Margaret felt a familiar satisfaction. She'd spent her career creating systems that rewarded performance and penalized complacency. Now she was applying those same principles to the most important business relationship of her life, her family. The 30-day countdown had begun, and for the first time in years, Thompson family members would discover what it felt like to earn their place at the table, instead of simply assuming it. Margaret Thompson had built her empire by recognizing that respect was earned through results, not inherited through genetics. It was time her family learned the same lesson. Margaret Thompson stood at the head of the Thompson Industries boardroom, facing an audience she'd never addressed before, her own family members, now dressed in business attire and carrying portfolios like job applicants. 2 weeks had passed since her ultimatum, and the transformation was remarkable. Robert sat straighter than she'd seen him in years. Michael had traded his Silicon Valley casual wear for a proper suit, and Sarah looked like she was preparing for the most important pitch of her investment career. "Before we begin," Margaret announced, her voice carrying the authority that had commanded this same boardroom for decades, "I want to establish the rules of engagement. You're here because you've chosen to participate in proving your worthiness for Thompson inheritance. This is not family therapy. This is not negotiation. This is evaluation." Jennifer Chen sat at the conference table with a laptop, officially documenting what would become the most unusual performance review in Thompson Industries history. Around the table, legal pads and pens had replaced the casual conversation and wine glasses that typically characterized family gatherings. Emma had been the first to respond to Margaret's 3 options, choosing what she called the independent achievement path. She had spent the past 2 weeks frantically building a business plan for a marketing consultancy that would serve Chicago's mid-market construction companies. Her presentation materials were spread across one end of the table, charts and financial projections that showed she'd inherited at least some of the Thompson analytical capability. "Emma, you're first," Margaret said, settling into her chair with the same focus she brought to quarterly earnings reviews. "You have 15 minutes to present your business plan and explain how success in this venture would demonstrate your worthiness for Thompson inheritance." Emma stood, her Northwestern MBA training evident in her confident posture, but Margaret could see the nervousness in her hands as she activated the room's presentation system. "Grandma Margaret, board members," she caught herself. "Mrs. Thompson, I've developed a comprehensive strategy for Thompson Marketing Solutions, a boutique consultancy focused on helping mid-sized construction companies develop more effective client relationships and project marketing." The presentation was impressive. Emma had clearly spent sleepless nights researching market opportunities, competitive analysis, and financial projections. Her slides showed a deep understanding of the construction industry's marketing challenges, detailed client acquisition strategies, and realistic revenue forecasts that suggested she understood the difference between optimism and delusion. My target market consists of construction companies with annual revenues between $5 and $50 million. Emma continued, her confidence growing as she hit her stride. These companies are too large to operate on word of mouth alone, but too small to afford traditional advertising agencies. I'm proposing to fill that gap with specialized services that understand construction project cycles and decision-making processes. Margaret made notes on her legal pad, evaluating not just the business plan, but Emma's presentation skills, her research depth, and her apparent commitment to independence. What's your funding requirement, and how do you propose to repay Thompson Industries if we provide startup capital? I'm requesting a $200,000 loan at market interest rates, to be repaid over 5 years with quarterly payments beginning in month 6. Emma's voice steadied as she moved into familiar MBA territory. Collateral would include all business assets plus a personal guarantee, and I'm proposing to pay back the $500,000 in family benefits I've received over 7 years, also at market interest rates. The room fell silent. Emma wasn't just proposing to start a business. She was volunteering to pay back half a decade of family support. Margaret felt a grudging respect for her granddaughter's courage, even as she recognized the desperation that had motivated such dramatic terms. Questions? Margaret asked the room. Robert leaned forward, his lawyer instincts engaging. Emma, what happens if the business fails? How do you guarantee repayment if your projections don't materialize? Uncle Robert, I don't guarantee success. I guarantee accountability. If the business fails, I'll find other employment and maintain the payment schedule even if it takes me 15 years. Emma's directness surprised everyone, including Margaret. I'm not asking for forgiveness if I fail, I'm asking for the opportunity to prove I can succeed. Michael, who'd built and sold 2 tech companies, studied Emma's financial projections with professional interest. Your customer acquisition costs seem low. In my experience, breaking into established business relationships takes longer and costs more than most entrepreneurs anticipate. Emma nodded, pulling up a detailed timeline. I've accounted for 18 months of relationship building before expecting significant revenue. My background research includes conversations with 12 potential clients who've expressed interest in services like these. I'm not just projecting market demand, I'm documenting it. Margaret felt a familiar satisfaction. Emma was thinking like an entrepreneur rather than an inheritor, addressing challenges rather than assuming success. Emma, assuming we approve your loan request, what role do you envision Thompson Industries playing in your business development? None beyond the initial financing. I want to succeed or fail based on my own capabilities, not family connections or Thompson Industries' reputation. Emma's answer carried conviction that seemed to surprise her own parents. The only way to prove I deserve inheritance is to demonstrate I don't need it. After Emma's presentation, the focus shifted to Michael, who'd chosen the Join Thompson Industries option despite his successful tech career. His decision had shocked the family more than Emma's entrepreneurial proposal. Michael, explain your reasoning, Margaret said, consulting the notes Jennifer had prepared about his current compensation and stock options in Silicon Valley. Michael stood with the confident energy of someone who'd pitched to venture capitalists, but his expression carried something Margaret hadn't seen before: humility. Mother, I've spent 15 years building other people's companies while taking benefits from the company you built. I've been a tourist in the family business while being a beneficiary of family wealth. He pulled out a folder containing what appeared to be resignation letters and financial documents. I've resigned from my position in San Francisco, sold my stock options, and liquidated my California real estate. I'm proposing to join Thompson Industries as Director of Digital Infrastructure, a position that would require me to relocate to Chicago and take a 60% salary cut from my current compensation. The room absorbed this information in stunned silence. Michael wasn't just talking about joining the family business, he was sacrificing a lucrative career to do it. Why now? Margaret asked. You've had opportunities to join Thompson Industries for decades. Because I finally understand the difference between benefiting from your success and contributing to it. Michael's voice carried the weight of genuine reflection. I've been taking Thompson dividends while building competing businesses. I've been using family money to fund a lifestyle that had nothing to do with family contribution. Margaret studied her middle son, recognizing something she'd been hoping to see for years: actual accountability. What specific value do you believe you can add to Thompson Industries? Michael activated his own presentation, revealing detailed analysis of Thompson Industries' current technology infrastructure. Mother, your company is technologically behind its competitors. Your project management systems are outdated, your client communication platforms are inefficient, and your data analysis capabilities are limited. I can modernize Thompson Industries' entire digital infrastructure while maintaining the operational culture you've built. The presentation was technically sophisticated, but grounded in understanding Thompson Industries' actual needs, rather than Silicon Valley trends. Michael had clearly spent significant time analyzing the company's systems and identifying specific improvement opportunities. Timeline and budget? Margaret asked. 18 months for complete implementation, with quarterly milestones and measurable improvements in efficiency and client satisfaction. Total budget of $2.8 million, which my analysis suggests will generate at least $8 million in additional revenue through improved project management and client retention. Margaret made extensive notes, impressed despite herself. Michael wasn't just offering to join the company. He was proposing to transform it while proving his commitment through personal sacrifice. The morning continued with Sarah's presentation, which surprised everyone by proposing to establish a Thompson Industries investment fund that would provide capital for employee entrepreneurship and community development projects. Her Wall Street expertise, combined with genuine understanding of Thompson Industries' values, created a proposal that was both financially sophisticated and emotionally compelling. Robert's presentation focused on expanding Thompson Industries' legal and regulatory capabilities, proposing to transition his private practice into a full-time role as the company's general counsel, while developing new business opportunities in government contracting and public-private partnerships. By lunch, Margaret had heard 4 comprehensive proposals from family members who'd spent 2 weeks proving they could think strategically about Thompson Industries' future rather than just their own financial security. The transformation was remarkable, but Margaret wasn't ready to declare victory yet. This afternoon, she announced as the family broke for lunch, we'll discuss implementation timelines, performance metrics, and accountability measures. You've proven you can create impressive presentations. Now you need to prove you can deliver results. The 30-day test was only half complete, but Margaret was seeing something she hadn't witnessed in decades. Thompson family members treating inheritance as an opportunity to earn rather than a right to claim. The question now was whether their newfound accountability would survive the pressure of actual performance expectations. 3 weeks into the 30-day ultimatum, Margaret Thompson found herself doing something she hadn't done in 40 years, questioning a business decision. She sat in her study at 11 p.m., surrounded by performance reports, financial projections, and psychological evaluations that painted a picture she hadn't expected to see. Her family was succeeding. Emma's marketing consultancy had secured its first 3 clients within 10 days of launching, including 2 companies that had specifically sought her out after hearing about her approach through industry connections. Her business plan hadn't just been theoretical. She'd been networking and building relationships while creating her presentation. The loan paperwork sat on Margaret's desk, awaiting her signature, but Emma had already begun operating on personal savings to avoid any appearance of depending on family money for daily operations. Michael's technology assessment had revealed problems Margaret hadn't even known existed. His preliminary report documented 17 separate inefficiencies in Thompson Industries systems that were costing the company an estimated $200,000 monthly in lost productivity. More importantly, he'd identified opportunities for revenue generation through data analysis that could transform Thompson Industries from a traditional construction company into a predictive development firm. Sarah's investment fund proposal had evolved beyond her initial presentation into a comprehensive strategy for Thompson Industries to become a catalyst for Chicago's small business development. Her Wall Street connections were already generating interest from institutional investors who wanted to partner with Thompson Industries on community development projects that would benefit both the company's bottom line and the city's economic growth. Even Robert's legal transformation had produced immediate results. His transition from external counsel to internal general counsel had already saved Thompson Industries $180,000 in legal fees, while positioning the company for major government contracts that his political connections had identified. The problem was that success complicated Margaret's anger. Jennifer knocked softly on the study door, carrying the evening reports Margaret had requested. "Mrs. Thompson? The final performance metrics you wanted." Margaret gestured to the chair across from her desk, the same position where this entire crisis had begun 3 weeks ago, when she'd discovered the family photograph. "What's the summary, Jennifer?" "Honestly, they're exceeding expectations across every measurable category." Jennifer pulled up spreadsheets on her tablet. "Emma's client satisfaction scores are averaging 4.8 out of 5. Michael's efficiency improvements are ahead of schedule and under budget. Sarah's fund has attracted preliminary commitments of $15 million from external investors. Robert's legal work has identified $3.2 million in cost savings and new revenue opportunities." Margaret felt the familiar satisfaction of watching a business plan succeed, complicated by the unfamiliar confusion of watching a personal strategy work too well. What about the intangibles? Attitude, effort, accountability? That's where it gets interesting. Jennifer pulled up her observational notes. "Emma is working 70-hour weeks and hasn't asked for any family support or assistance. Michael relocated to Chicago, sold his California house, and is living in a one-bedroom apartment to minimize expenses while proving his commitment. Sarah has been flying to Chicago every weekend at her own expense to work on the fund development." Margaret absorbed this information, recognizing that her family wasn't just performing, they were transforming. And Robert? Robert might be the most surprising. He's terminated his most lucrative private clients to avoid conflicts of interest with Thompson Industries. His law practice is essentially shutting down to focus entirely on family business success. Jennifer paused, studying Margaret's expression. "Mrs. Thompson, they're not just meeting your expectations, they're exceeding them in ways that suggest genuine change rather than temporary performance." Margaret walked to her window, looking out at the city where Thompson Industries cranes dotted the skyline. Each of those projects represented decisions she'd made, risks she'd taken, visions she'd implemented. The empire spread below her was her life's work, and for 30 years she'd assumed it would be inherited by people who viewed it as an entitlement rather than a responsibility. Now she was discovering that crisis could transform entitlement into accountability, that ultimatums could generate genuine commitment, that the family she'd written off as spoiled inheritors might actually be capable of becoming worthy successors. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Grandma M, landed client number 4 today. No family connections, pure merit. Thank you for forcing me to prove I could do this. -E." Margaret stared at the message, recognizing something she'd been avoiding for 3 weeks. Her family's transformation was real, and it was forcing her to reconsider everything she'd assumed about their character and capabilities. "Jennifer, schedule individual meetings with each of them tomorrow, 1 hour each, starting with Emma at 9 a.m. Margaret returned to her desk, pulling out the 3 estate planning scenarios Harrison Blackwell had prepared. It's time for final evaluation. The next morning brought unseasonably warm weather for late October, and Margaret found herself looking forward to conversations she'd been dreading for weeks. Emma arrived early, carrying a portfolio that had grown substantially since their last formal meeting. "Grandma Margaret, thank you for seeing me." Emma's confidence had solidified over 3 weeks of independent success. She no longer carried the nervous energy of someone seeking approval. Instead, she projected the focused determination of someone who discovered her own capabilities. "Emma, before we discuss your performance, I want to understand your motivation. 3 weeks ago, you were planning to move to Austin and build someone else's business. What changed?" Emma considered the question, her expression showing the kind of thoughtful analysis that had been missing from their previous conversations. "I realized I was running away from expectations I'd never been asked to meet. You never told me I had to work for Thompson Industries. You never said the family money came with obligations. But that didn't mean those expectations and obligations didn't exist." Margaret made notes, impressed by Emma's self-awareness. "And now? Now I understand that inheriting Thompson wealth means inheriting Thompson responsibility. I can't take benefits from an empire you built without contributing to the empire's continuation." Emma pulled out her business reports, showing client feedback and financial projections that had improved significantly since her initial presentation. The consultancy isn't just my business, Grandma. It's proof that I understand the difference between entitlement and achievement. Margaret reviewed Emma's client testimonials, noting comments that praised her work ethic, strategic thinking, and business development skills. Emma, assuming your business continues to succeed, how do you envision your relationship with Thompson Industries long-term? I want to be worthy of inheriting Thompson legacy, but I don't want to inherit it as a gift. I want to earn it through contribution. Emma's answer carried conviction that surprised Margaret. Whether that means growing my consultancy into a major marketing firm, eventually joining Thompson Industries in a leadership role, or finding other ways to add value to the family business. I want my inheritance to be based on merit, not genetics. The conversation continued for an hour, covering Emma's business development plans, her vision for contributing to Thompson Industries' growth, and her understanding of the responsibilities that came with Thompson family membership. By the time Emma left, Margaret had added extensive notes to her evaluation file, most of them positive. Michael's meeting revealed similar transformation. His technology implementation was ahead of schedule, his cost savings projections were conservative rather than optimistic, and his integration into Thompson Industries' culture showed genuine respect for the company's values while bringing necessary modernization. "Mother, I need to address something directly," Michael said as their meeting concluded. "I spent 15 years taking Thompson money while building competing businesses. I used family wealth to fund a lifestyle that had nothing to do with family contribution. That was wrong, and I want to make it right." Margaret studied her middle son, recognizing accountability she'd never seen before. "How?" "I want to pay back the money I've received over the past decade, with interest, not as a condition of inheritance, but as acknowledgement that I took without giving for too long." Michael pulled out financial statements, showing he'd liquidated his California assets specifically for this purpose. "I can transfer $2.3 million to Thompson Industries by the end of the week. It won't fully cover what I've received, but it's everything I have beyond basic living expenses." The gesture was unprecedented in Thompson family history. Michael wasn't just offering to contribute to the business. He was volunteering to repay past benefits that had never been characterized as loans. Sarah's evaluation revealed similar transformation. Her investment fund had attracted serious institutional interest, her business development strategy was generating actual opportunities rather than theoretical possibilities, and her commitment to relocating to Chicago suggested genuine dedication to Thompson Industries' success. "Mother, I need to tell you something I should have said 20 years ago," Sarah began their meeting. "I was wrong to maintain distance from the family business while accepting family benefits. I was wrong to prioritize my Wall Street career while taking Thompson dividends. I was wrong to treat this company as a source of income rather than a source of pride." Margaret felt unexpected emotion at Sarah's directness. "What changed your perspective?" "Realizing that you built something extraordinary, and I've been a tourist in my own family legacy." Sarah's investment banker composure cracked slightly. "I've spent 15 years helping other families build wealth while ignoring the wealth my own family had already built. That was selfish and short-sighted." Robert's final evaluation completed the day's assessments. His legal work had generated immediate value for Thompson Industries, his business development efforts were producing concrete opportunities, and his commitment to the company's success was evident in his willingness to sacrifice his lucrative private practice. "Mother, I owe you an apology that goes beyond the reunion planning or the succession discussions," Robert said as their meeting began. "I've been treating Thompson Industries as my inheritance rather than your achievement. I've been planning your retirement rather than earning your respect." That was arrogant and presumptuous. Margaret listened as Robert outlined his vision for Thompson Industries' legal and regulatory expansion, his plans for government contracting opportunities, and his commitment to serving the company's interests, rather than just his own advancement. As the day concluded, Margaret sat alone in her office, reviewing evaluation notes that painted a picture she hadn't expected. Her family had used her ultimatum as an opportunity for genuine transformation, rather than temporary performance. They weren't just meeting her expectations, they were exceeding them, while demonstrating accountability, work ethic, and business acumen she'd never seen before. Jennifer knocked and entered with Margaret's evening schedule. "Mrs. Thompson? Harrison Blackwell is here for your 6 p.m. estate planning meeting." Are you ready to make your final decision? Margaret looked at the 3 estate planning options spread across her desk, then at the performance evaluations documenting her family's remarkable transformation over 3 weeks. For the first time in her career, she was facing a business decision where success created more complicated choices than failure would have. Send Harrison in, Jennifer. It's time to finalize my legacy. The family photographs still sat on her desk, 37 faces celebrating a gathering that had excluded her. But now Margaret understood that the photograph hadn't been the real problem. It had been a symptom of deeper issues that could be addressed, assumptions that could be challenged, relationships that could be rebuilt. Margaret Thompson had spent 3 weeks testing whether her family could transform entitlement into accountability. The test results were conclusive. They could, and they had. Now she faced the most important business decision of her life, determining whether transformation justified inheritance, whether change deserved forgiveness, whether her family's future contribution could overcome their past assumptions. The 30-day ultimatum was ending, but Margaret realized the real evaluation was just beginning. Harrison Blackwell entered Margaret's office carrying a briefcase that contained the most complex estate planning documents he'd ever drafted. 3 weeks of watching the Thompson family transformation had convinced him that he was witnessing something unprecedented in his 30 years of high-stakes inheritance law. A family actually earning their legacy in real time. Margaret, I have to admit, when you first showed me that photograph, I expected this to end with a complete disinheritance and years of litigation. Harrison settled into his familiar chair, pulling out thick folders marked with each family member's name. What I'm seeing instead is the most remarkable family business turnaround I've ever documented. Margaret poured herself a glass of water, her hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. The nervous energy that had driven her through 3 weeks of testing and evaluation had settled into something closer to anticipation. Harrison, before we finalize anything, I need to share something I haven't told anyone, not even Jennifer. She walked to her private safe, retrieving a folder that Harrison had never seen before. 3 months ago, I was diagnosed with early-stage dementia. Nothing dramatic, nothing immediately debilitating, but enough to make me question my long-term decision-making capacity. Harrison's expression shifted from surprise to professional concern. Margaret, this changes the legal implications significantly. If your family discovers this diagnosis, they could challenge any estate modifications as products of diminished capacity. Exactly, which is why I needed to test them now, while my judgment is still legally sound, while my decisions still carry full legal weight. Margaret opened the medical folder, showing Harrison neurological assessments and cognitive testing results. Dr. Williams estimates I have 18 to 24 months before symptoms become noticeable to others, possibly 3 to 4 years before serious impairment. The revelation recontextualized everything Harrison thought he understood about Margaret's ultimatum. This hadn't been about hurt feelings over exclusion from a photograph. This had been about a dying woman's desperate attempt to determine whether her life's work would be inherited by people worthy of preserving it. The family photo was just the catalyst, Margaret continued, settling back into her chair. It made me realize that my children were already planning my succession without my input, assuming my irrelevance while I was still fully competent. If they could exclude me from family decisions while I was healthy, what would they do when I was actually vulnerable? Harrison absorbed the implications, his legal mind immediately calculating the complexities this added to estate planning. Margaret, this means every decision you make now needs to account for future scenarios where you may not be able to protect your interests or evaluate your family's performance. Which is why the 30-day test was so critical. I needed to know whether they could demonstrate genuine accountability when the stakes were clear, whether they could transform entitlement into contribution when their inheritance depended on it. Margaret pulled out her evaluation notes from the day's meetings. The results exceeded my expectations, but they also created new dilemmas. Margaret activated the room's presentation system, displaying a comprehensive analysis she'd been working on since the evaluations concluded. The screen showed performance metrics, financial projections, and character assessments that painted a detailed picture of each family member's transformation. Emma's business success isn't just impressive, it's sustainable. Her client retention rate is perfect, her profit margins are healthy, and her expansion plans are realistic rather than aggressive. More importantly, she's demonstrated genuine independence while maintaining family loyalty. Margaret highlighted Emma's financial projections. She's on track to pay back every dollar of family support within 5 years, while building a business that could eventually employ dozens of people. Harrison studied the data, impressed despite his decades of skepticism about family business dynamics. And Michael's technology improvements have already generated $400,000 in cost savings and identified $2.8 million in new revenue opportunities. But the real transformation is personal. He's volunteering to repay past benefits, he's working for significantly less compensation than his California salary, and he's demonstrating genuine commitment to Thompson Industries rather than just Thompson profits. The presentation continued with Sarah's investment fund development and Robert's legal expansion, each showing measurable success combined with character transformation that suggested permanent change rather than temporary performance. Harrison, here's what I've realized over 3 weeks of evaluation. My family isn't inherently entitled or incompetent. They were enabled. I gave them money without expectations, benefits without accountability, inheritance assumptions without inheritance requirements. Margaret paused the presentation, looking directly at Harrison. The family photo exclusion wasn't malicious. It was symptomatic of people who'd been trained to view me as a source of funding rather than a source of leadership. Harrison made extensive notes, recognizing that Margaret's analysis was both personally insightful and legally significant. So what's your decision about the estate planning? Margaret smiled for the first time in weeks, but it was a complex expression that carried satisfaction, sadness, and determination in equal measure. I'm implementing a fourth option we never discussed: conditional inheritance with performance-based progression. She activated a new slide, showing an estate structure more complex than anything Harrison had previously drafted. Each family member will inherit a base amount immediately upon my death, enough to provide security but not enough to provide luxury. The remainder of their inheritance will be distributed based on measurable contribution to Thompson Industries' success over a 10-year period following my death. Harrison studied the proposed structure, recognizing its elegance and complexity. This creates ongoing accountability rather than one-time inheritance. Exactly. Emma's marketing consultancy, if it continues to succeed and eventually works with Thompson Industries, could earn her full inheritance within 5 years. Michael's technology modernization, if it generates the projected returns, could earn him controlling interest in the company within 7 years. Sarah's investment fund, if it produces community development results, could earn her both full inheritance and a permanent board position. Margaret pulled up additional slides showing detailed performance metrics, evaluation criteria, and progression timelines that would govern inheritance distribution for a decade after her death. But Harrison, here's the critical element. If my dementia progresses faster than expected, if I become incompetent before my death, the performance-based inheritance structure will already be legally established. My family won't be able to challenge my mental capacity because these decisions are being made while I'm demonstrably competent, and the ongoing evaluation will be handled by independent trustees rather than by me. Harrison was taking rapid notes, impressed by the sophisticated structure Margaret had developed. This eliminates the possibility of dementia-related challenges while maintaining long-term accountability. And it creates positive incentives rather than punitive ones. My family isn't being punished for past mistakes. They're being rewarded for future contributions. The 30-day test proved they're capable of transformation. The 10-year inheritance structure will prove whether that transformation is permanent. Margaret moved to her window, looking out at the Thompson Industries construction sites that dotted Chicago's skyline. Harrison, I've spent 6 decades building this empire. The last thing I want is for it to be inherited by people who view it as a source of dividends rather than a source of purpose. But the past 3 weeks have shown me that my family is capable of viewing Thompson Industries as a legacy worth preserving rather than just wealth worth inheriting. The legal implications were significant, and Harrison immediately began outlining the documentation requirements. Margaret, this structure will require extensive legal frameworks, trust establishment, performance measurement systems, independent oversight mechanisms. We're essentially creating a corporate governance structure for family inheritance, which is exactly what Thompson Industries needs for long-term sustainability. My children have proven they can contribute to the business when expectations are clear and accountability is required. This inheritance structure will maintain those expectations and that accountability permanently. Margaret returned to her desk, pulling out a final document she'd been preparing. There's one more element, Harrison. I'm establishing a parallel structure for non-family employees, profit-sharing programs, ownership opportunities, and leadership development initiatives that will ensure Thompson Industries' success doesn't depend entirely on family competence. Harrison reviewed the employee ownership proposals, recognizing that Margaret was creating multiple pathways for Thompson Industries' continuation. This diversifies leadership development beyond family members. Exactly. If my family continues to excel, they'll earn controlling interest through performance. If they don't, the company will have alternative leadership structures to ensure continuity. Margaret smiled with satisfaction. I'm not just planning for my family's inheritance. I'm planning for my company's survival, regardless of my family's long-term competence. The conversation continued for 2 hours, covering legal technicalities, tax implications, and implementation timelines. By the time Harrison left with his assignment to draft the most complex estate plan of his career, Margaret felt something she hadn't experienced since receiving the family photograph: complete control over her legacy. The 30-day ultimatum had revealed that her family could transform when accountability was required. The performance-based inheritance structure would ensure that transformation remained permanent. And the employee ownership programs would guarantee Thompson Industries' success regardless of whether family competence proved sustainable. Margaret Thompson had spent her career making decisions that others couldn't or wouldn't make. Tonight, she'd made the most important decision of her life, choosing to trust her family's demonstrated transformation while protecting against their potential regression. The photograph that had started this crisis still sat on her desk, but it no longer represented exclusion and assumption. Now it represented the moment when everything changed, when a family learned the difference between inheriting wealth and earning legacy. Tomorrow, she would announce her decision to the family, who'd spent 30 days proving they deserved the chance to inherit what she'd spent a lifetime building. For the first time since her dementia diagnosis, Margaret felt confident that Thompson Industries would survive and thrive long after she was gone. Not because of her family's genetics, but because of their demonstrated commitment to the values and vision that had built an empire from a single construction company. The real test was just beginning, but Margaret Thompson had created a structure that would ensure her legacy endured, regardless of whether her family continued to earn it. 1 year later, Margaret Thompson stood in the same Lincoln Park mansion where this story began, but everything had changed. The dining room that once echoed with silence now buzzed with animated conversation as the Thompson family gathered for their first annual Accountability Summit, a tradition Margaret had established to replace the casual family gatherings that had once excluded her. The marble-floored foyer displayed a new family photograph, this one taken 6 months ago at Thompson Industries headquarters. Unlike the previous image that had triggered this entire transformation, this photograph showed Margaret prominently centered among family members who were clearly engaged in serious business rather than social posturing. Everyone wore Thompson Industries hard hats and safety vests, standing in front of the company's newest development project, a mixed-use complex that combined Michael's technology innovations, Emma's marketing strategies, Sarah's investment planning, and Robert's regulatory expertise. Jennifer Chen entered, carrying the annual performance reports that would determine each family member's inheritance progression for the coming year. Mrs. Thompson, everyone's arrived and the presentation materials are ready. Are you prepared for what might be the most important family meeting in Thompson history? Margaret felt remarkably clear-headed despite her medical diagnosis, a sharpness that Dr. Williams attributed to the intellectual stimulation of managing her complex inheritance structure. Jennifer, I've been preparing for this meeting for 73 years. I'm ready. The family assembled in Margaret's study looked fundamentally different from the group that had received her ultimatum 12 months ago. Emma carried herself with the confidence of an entrepreneur whose consultancy had grown from 3 employees to 15, with clients across the Midwest and expansion plans for national growth. Michael wore a Thompson Industries polo shirt rather than Silicon Valley casual wear, his technology integration having generated $8.2 million in additional revenue while positioning the company as an industry leader in predictive development analytics. Sarah had relocated permanently to Chicago, her investment fund having attracted $47 million in commitments while funding 12 local business startups that employed 340 people. Robert's legal practice had evolved into Thompson Industries' most profitable department, his government contracting initiatives having secured $23 million in public works projects while establishing the company as a preferred partner for municipal development. Most remarkably, the competitive tension that had historically characterized Thompson family gatherings had been replaced by collaborative energy. Margaret observed her children and grandchildren discussing joint projects, shared challenges, and coordinated strategies with the focus of business partners rather than inheritance competitors. Before we review individual performance metrics, Margaret began, activating the room's presentation system, I want to acknowledge something unprecedented in Thompson family history. For the first time in 50 years, every family member contributed more value to Thompson Industries than they received in family benefits. The screen displayed comprehensive financial analysis showing each family member's economic contribution versus their inheritance progression, employee compensation, and business support. The numbers told a story that would have been impossible to imagine 12 months earlier. The Thompson family had become financially profitable to Thompson Industries rather than simply being beneficiaries of its success. Emma, your marketing consultancy generated $1.8 million in new client relationships for Thompson Industries, while requiring only $400,000 in family business referrals. Your independent success created value, rather than consuming it. Margaret pulled up Emma's detailed performance metrics, showing client satisfaction scores, revenue generation, and business development that exceeded every projection from her original business plan. Emma leaned forward, her engagement obvious. Grandma Margaret, the consultancy's success opened doors I never knew existed. Working independently while supporting the family business taught me that Thompson legacy isn't about inheriting wealth. It's about multiplying it. Margaret smiled, noting Emma's transformed perspective. Emma, based on your performance metrics, you've earned 85% inheritance progression for this year. If your business continues current growth trends, you'll achieve full inheritance eligibility within 3 years, rather than the projected 5. The room absorbed this information with the kind of focused attention that Margaret had previously seen only in corporate boardrooms. Her family was treating inheritance like the business proposition it had always been, rather than the genetic entitlement they'd once assumed. Michael, your technology integration exceeded every performance benchmark we established. Thompson Industries' digital transformation generated $8.2 million in additional revenue, reduced operational costs by 23%, and positioned us for expansion opportunities we couldn't have pursued with outdated systems. Margaret pulled up charts showing efficiency improvements, client satisfaction increases, and competitive advantages that Michael's work had created. Michael's response carried the satisfaction of someone who discovered professional fulfillment rather than just financial compensation. Mother, modernizing Thompson Industries wasn't just a career change, it was a chance to contribute to something bigger than any startup I'd built. The technology improvements work because they serve the company's vision rather than disrupting it. Margaret nodded approvingly. Michael, you've earned 92% inheritance progression, the highest of any family member. Your combination of technical innovation and cultural integration has made you the leading candidate for eventual CEO succession, assuming continued performance. The CEO succession announcement created visible tension in the room, but it was competitive tension rather than resentful tension, the difference between professionals vying for advancement and siblings fighting over gifts. Sarah, your investment fund achievements have been extraordinary, but more importantly, they've demonstrated that Thompson values can generate profits while serving community development. Margaret displayed Sarah's fund performance, showing returns that impressed even her Wall Street background while creating sustainable local business growth. Sarah's transformation from distant family member to engaged community developer had been perhaps the most dramatic of all the family changes. Mother, the investment fund taught me that our family wealth carries responsibilities as well as privileges. Building businesses in Chicago while generating returns for Thompson Industries gave me purpose I never found in New York. Margaret's evaluation continued with Robert's legal expansion, which had transformed Thompson Industries from a construction company that occasionally navigated regulations into a development firm that actively shaped municipal policy while generating substantial government contracting revenue. Robert, your legal work generated $23 million in new business opportunities while reducing our regulatory compliance costs by 45%. More importantly, your government relationships have positioned Thompson Industries as a policy partner rather than just a permit applicant. Margaret pulled up Robert's business development metrics, showing contract wins, relationship building, and strategic positioning that had elevated the company's industry status. Robert's response reflected the confidence of someone who'd found his professional identity. Mother, transitioning from external counsel to internal leadership allowed me to build long-term value rather than just solving immediate problems. I understand now that practicing law for Thompson Industries means protecting and expanding the legacy rather than just providing legal services. After completing individual evaluations, Margaret moved to the presentation's final section, Collective Achievement Analysis and Future Planning. This year, your combined contributions generated $34.7 million in additional value for Thompson Industries, while requiring only $8.3 million in family business support and inheritance progression. You've transformed from being wealth consumers into wealth creators. The financial transformation was remarkable, but Margaret was more impressed by the cultural transformation. Her family members were collaborating rather than competing, innovating rather than inheriting, building rather than just benefiting. Looking forward, I'm announcing several modifications to the inheritance structure based on your demonstrated success. Margaret activated a new presentation showing expanded opportunities and accelerated timelines. Each of you has proven that accountability generates achievement rather than resentment. Therefore, I'm increasing inheritance progression opportunities while adding leadership development programs that will prepare you for complete Thompson Industries ownership. The legal implications were significant, and Harrison immediately began outlining the documentation requirements. Margaret, this structure will require extensive legal frameworks, trust establishment, performance measurement systems, independent oversight mechanisms. We're essentially creating a corporate governance structure for family inheritance, which is exactly what Thompson Industries needs for long-term sustainability. My children have proven they can contribute to the business when expectations are clear and accountability is required. This inheritance structure will maintain those expectations and that accountability permanently. Margaret returned to her desk, pulling out a final document she'd been preparing. There's one more element, Harrison. I'm establishing a parallel structure for non-family employees, profit-sharing programs, ownership opportunities, and leadership development initiatives that will ensure Thompson Industries' success doesn't depend entirely on family competence. Harrison reviewed the employee ownership proposals, recognizing that Margaret was creating multiple pathways for Thompson Industries' continuation. This diversifies leadership development beyond family members. Exactly. If my family continues to excel, they'll earn controlling interest through performance. If they don't, the company will have alternative leadership structures to ensure continuity. Margaret smiled with satisfaction. I'm not just planning for my family's inheritance. I'm planning for my company's survival, regardless of my family's long-term competence. The conversation continued for 2 hours, covering legal technicalities, tax implications, and implementation timelines. By the time Harrison left with his assignment to draft the most complex estate plan of his career, Margaret felt something she hadn't experienced since receiving the family photograph: complete control over her legacy. The 30-day ultimatum had revealed that her family could transform when accountability was required. The performance-based inheritance structure would ensure that transformation remained permanent. And the employee ownership programs would guarantee Thompson Industries' success regardless of whether family competence proved sustainable. Margaret Thompson had spent her career making decisions that others couldn't or wouldn't make. Tonight, she'd made the most important decision of her life, choosing to trust her family's demonstrated transformation while protecting against their potential regression. The photograph that had started this crisis still sat on her desk, but it no longer represented exclusion and assumption. Now it represented the moment when everything changed, when a family learned the difference between inheriting wealth and earning legacy. Tomorrow, she would announce her decision to the family, who'd spent 30 days proving they deserved the chance to inherit what she'd spent a lifetime building. For the first time since her dementia diagnosis, Margaret felt confident that Thompson Industries would survive and thrive long after she was gone. Not because of her family's genetics, but because of their demonstrated commitment to the values and vision that had built an empire from a single construction company. The real test was just beginning, but Margaret Thompson had created a structure that would ensure her legacy endured, regardless of whether her family continued to earn it. 1 year later, Margaret Thompson stood in the same Lincoln Park mansion where this story began, but everything had changed. The dining room that once echoed with silence now buzzed with animated conversation as the Thompson family gathered for their first annual Accountability Summit, a tradition Margaret had established to replace the casual family gatherings that had once excluded her. The marble-floored foyer displayed a new family photograph, this one taken 6 months ago at Thompson Industries headquarters. Unlike the previous image that had triggered this entire transformation, this photograph showed Margaret prominently centered among family members who were clearly engaged in serious business rather than social posturing. Everyone wore Thompson Industries hard hats and safety vests, standing in front of the company's newest development project, a mixed-use complex that combined Michael's technology innovations, Emma's marketing strategies, Sarah's investment planning, and Robert's regulatory expertise.